Rain lashes Los Angeles, shadows gripping a quiet vet clinic where Keanu Reeves stands, heart racing, as a scanner screams against Rex, his newly adopted police dog. Beeps erupt, the screen blazing with encrypted codes, coordinates, secrets no pet should carry. This isn't normal, Dr. Ellis chokes, hands trembling, eyes wide. It's military and it's live. Keanu's stare hardens, shock flaring into resolve. Live with what? He demands, voice cutting the storm's roar. In an instant, a simple adoption twists into a pulse-pounding mystery. Rex, a key to a buried past, and Keanu, poised to unearth a truth that could shatter everything. Hey, where are you watching from? A quiet nook or a city's pulse? Tell me in the comments. Hooked on tales of grit and wonder? Subscribe to Motivation for Success. Let's spark your path to a fearless future, one story at a time. Beneath a sky that didn't merely weep but raged, Los Angeles drowned in a tempest's embrace, the rain slashing down with a ferocity that turned streets into trembling mirrors of chaos. Keanu Reeves emerged from the storm's grip, his motorcycle jacket pulled taut against the wind's howl, boots slicing through puddles as he dismounted outside the Harmony Veterinary Center. This wasn't a day scripted by Hollywood's glare or softened by fame's fleeting glow. No, this was primal, a call from somewhere deep within, a quiet tremor that had stirred when an old friend's voice, hushed and urgent, spoke of a retired police dog waiting in the shadows. To choose this path felt like standing on a cliff's edge, reckless and uncharted, yet a force inside him thundered with certainty. This was no accident, but a thread of destiny pulling tight. Stepping into the clinic, he crossed a threshold where the ordinary frayed into something electric. The rain's warlike rhythm pounded the roof, a relentless echo that swallowed the flicker of tired lights and the hum of a world holding its breath. His eyes swept across the room. A mother clutched her drenched kitten with desperate tenderness, an old man sagged beside a terrier's quiet loyalty, but they halted, caught by the figure behind the counter. Rex stood there, a monument of time and duty, his silver-flecked muzzle bearing the weight of 8 hard years, his amber gaze a fusion of a warrior's steel and a soul's unspoken longing. Keanu's chest tightened, breath snagging on a spark that flared between them, wild, wordless, alive. His hand moved across the adoption papers, steady in motion but trembling within, as Rex's eyes bore into him, a silent vow shimmering in their depths, whispering of burdens and bonds yet to be unveiled. Together, they plunged back into the storm's fury, rain striking Keanu's face like shards of a past he buried too long. Each drop stung, a memory clawing free, and as the wind screamed around them, his jaw clenched with a dawning truth: this was no mere companion at his side. Rex was a fracture in the weave of existence, a living testament to battles fought and secrets kept, a challenge etched in fate's own hand. In that moment, drenched and defiant, Keanu understood that this collision was more than chance. It was a summons to a journey that would unravel the man he'd been and forge the one he was meant to become. The storm didn't just mark the day, it baptized it, a herald of revelations waiting in the dark, daring him to grasp the thread and pull. In the sanctuary of his Hollywood Hills retreat, the storm didn't relent. It assaulted the glass walls with a ferocity that shook the bones of the house, a tempest determined to breach the fragile divide between chaos and calm. Within, a heavy silence held sway, broken only by the faint clink of a metal bowl as Keanu poured water for Rex, the sound echoing like a solitary note in an empty cathedral. The dog stood as if carved from stone, each muscle a testament to years of unyielding service, yet beneath that stoic surface flickered a shadow and unease that rippled through his frame like a current too deep to name. Rex's paw struck his neck once, then again, then harder, each motion a jagged plea, a desperate clawing against chains no eye could see. Keanu brushed it off at first, chalking it up to the sleek black leather collar now encircling Rex's throat, a polished replacement for the weathered gear of his past. But the pawing sharpened, grew wilder, a mute howl slicing through the stillness, demanding to be heard. As the sun dipped below the horizon, it tore the sky open with streaks of crimson and violet, a fleeting blaze that bled through the storm's unyielding rage. Keanu dropped to his knees beside Rex, his fingers grazing fur that quivered faintly under his touch, as if the dog's very soul trembled with a buried weight. Those amber eyes seized the fading light, mirrors of trust fractured by a restless, gnawing need, a secret straining at its seams, yearning for release. "What's tearing at you?" Keanu whispered, his voice a gravelly thread frayed by unease. Rex's ears flicked, his head tilting in a silent, anguished prayer, speaking a language Keanu felt but couldn't grasp, a call from a place beyond reach. That night, sleep was a fugitive, slipping through his fingers as the rain's ceaseless drumbeat merged with the pounding of his heart. Keanu lay sprawled across his bed, shadows writhing on the ceiling like specters of a life half-lived, flashes of film sets, echoes of friends lost to time, battles fought in the quiet of his own mind. Yet it was Rex's relentless pawing that anchored him, a mystery that coiled tighter with every scrape, refusing to be ignored. Was this merely the strain of a new beginning, a dog unsettled by change? Or was it a signal, a fraying thread from a past that pulsed with danger, unraveling now in the stillness of his home? He jolted upright, breath catching as his gaze locked on Rex's silhouette against the window, framed by the storm's dim glow. The dog's paw rose once more, clawing at the air, and Keanu's chest constricted, a visceral ache blooming within. This wasn't adaptation. This was a wound crying out, a voice from the abyss demanding he listen. Dawn didn't break gently, it clawed its way through the storm's gray shroud, a merciless light seeping into a world still trembling under the rain's wrath. Keanu Reeves stood in the dim glow of his Hollywood Hills refuge, the tempest's roar a relentless echo against the glass, when he seized his phone with a grip that betrayed the turmoil churning within. "We're going back," he said, his voice a jagged edge slicing through the silence, sharp with a resolve that left no room for doubt. Now. Breakfast was a fleeting ritual. Coffee scalded his throat, a bitter burn swallowed in haste, while Rex's gaze pierced him, those amber eyes carrying an intensity that prickled his skin like a warning etched in the air. The drive to the Harmony Veterinary Center was no mere journey, it was a desperate race against the deluge, wipers slashing through sheets of water, tires hissing on asphalt slick with the storm's fury. Rex sat beside him, breath steady as a metronome, a soldier poised for a command that lingered just beyond the horizon, his presence a silent vow that this moment held weight beyond the ordinary. The clinic rose before them like a stronghold cloaked in deception, its unassuming walls a frail mask over the chaos simmering beneath. Rain hammered the roof with the ferocity of gunfire, each drop a pulse in the growing tension that gripped the air as Keanu stormed through the door. Mia, the receptionist, recoiled at his approach, her fragile smile splintering under the force of his stare, her voice a faltering thread as she stammered, "Mr. Reeves again?" Her fingers stumbled over the keyboard, a nervous dance cut short before Keanu could unleash the retort burning on his tongue. Dr. Ellis burst into the fray, a wiry figure with eyes like a hawk's, his calm a brittle shell fracturing under the weight of what loomed ahead. "Bring him in," he snapped, his tone a command wrapped in urgency, ushering them into an exam room that felt too small, too brittle, as if it might shatter beneath the storm swelling within its walls. Inside, the space was a battlefield of contrasts. Cold steel clashed with warm wood, the rain's relentless pounding a staccato rhythm against the window, each beat a gunshot in the silence. Rex stood rigid, a monument of discipline forged by years of duty, as Dr. Ellis's hands moved over him, deft and searching, until they froze at his neck. "Pawing here?" the vet asked, his voice taut, a wire stretched to its breaking point. Keanu nodded, words trapped in a throat constricted by dread, as Ellis peeled back the thick fur with a tenderness that belied the storm in his eyes. A moment hung suspended, heavy with anticipation. Then a gasp tore from Ellis's chest, raw and unbidden, a sound that shattered the stillness like glass. "Wait," he muttered, lunging for a scanner on the counter, his movements frantic as the device hummed to life, its beam cutting through the dimness to graze Rex's neck. The air erupted, beep 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 beep, a frenzied staccato that ripped through the room, a cry of alarm that set every nerve ablaze. The scanner's screen ignited, a torrent of numbers, coordinates, and encrypted streams racing across it like a heartbeat spiraling into madness. Ellis stumbled back, the device slipping in his trembling hands, his voice a ragged choke as he gasped, "Jesus!" Keanu surged forward, adrenaline a wildfire in his veins, his demand a thunderclap that shook the chaos. "What is it?" His eyes burned into Ellis, who stood frozen, face drained of color, pupils darting like those of a creature cornered by an unseen predator. "A chip buried deep," Ellis rasped, each word a struggle against disbelief. "But this isn't an ID tag, Keanu. It's military active, transmitting now." The truth slammed into Keanu like a runaway train, his vision narrowing to Rex, whose ears flicked forward, body tensing as if summoned by a phantom's call, a soldier answering a war-long past. The room lurched, the reins hammering a primal drumbeat to the revelation crashing over him, each strike amplifying the weight of what he'd stumbled into. "Transmitting what?" Keanu growled, stepping closer, his shadow engulfing Ellis in a tide of urgency and unspoken fury. The vet fumbled, voice breaking as he stammered, "Data coordinates, logs, classified streams," his hands shaking as he jacked the scanner into his laptop. The screen flared with a digital deluge, code spilling forth like blood from a wound, a scream of danger that drowned out the storm. 16 years in this game, I've never seen anything like this," Ellis confessed, his words a plea for understanding in a moment that defied reason. Keanu's fists clenched, nails biting into his palms as questions clawed at his mind, each one a shard of glass cutting deeper. Who had planted the seed of secrets in Rex? Why did it pulse with life after all these years? And what abyss had he plunged into by bringing this dog into his world? The answers eluded him, but the weight of them pressed against his chest, a burden he hadn't chosen but could no longer deny, a call to face a truth that threatened to unravel everything he thought he knew. In the dim, trembling light of the Harmony Veterinary Center, where the storm's fury battered the windows like a relentless fist, Keanu Reeves stood with a resolve that burned hotter than the chaos swirling around him. His hand darted to his phone, fingers trembling not from fear but from a primal urgency, dialing a number seared into the recesses of his memory, a lifeline from a shadowed case he'd long buried beneath the weight of time. "Keanu Reeves," he snapped, his voice a steel blade honed by determination, cutting through the rain's roar. "Agent Pierce. Now. I've got a police dog with a live military chip in his neck. Adopted him yesterday." The operator's breath caught, a faint hitch of shock, before her clipped response connecting faded into the storm's howl. Keanu paced, each step a restless echo against the tiled floor, his shadow stretching and shrinking in the flickering light, while Rex's amber eyes followed him, steady, piercing, like a predator tracking a storm it couldn't outrun. Seconds bled into an agonizing eternity, the silence between them thick with unspoken questions, until Pierce's voice sliced through the line, low, lethal, a sound that carried the weight of a man who'd seen too many wars. "Keanu, what's happening?" The words were a demand wrapped in ice, and Keanu let loose the clinic's sterile chaos, the scanner's frantic cry, the torrent of data spilling from Rex's neck like blood from an open wound. Pierce's silence hung heavy, a guillotine poised to fall, before his reply cut through, "Don't move. Teams inbound. Touch nothing." The line died, leaving Keanu adrift in a sea of rain and revelation, his pulse sinking with the storm's relentless drumbeat. Half an hour later, the clinic transformed into a fortress of shadows and secrets, the quiet shattered by the screech of black SUVs tearing through the deluge, tires spitting gravel like shrapnel across the rain-soaked lot. Unmarked vans roared in their wake, disgorging a flood of operatives clad in tactical gear, their faces chiseled from granite, eyes hollow with the cold precision of men who lived on the edge of danger. Agent Pierce stormed through the door, a figure forged in silver and shadow, threads of gray weaving through his dark hair, his gaze a blade that cleaved through the haze of uncertainty. "The dog where?" He barked, his voice a thunderclap that demanded obedience. Keanu stepped forward, a shield between Pierce and Rex, his stance unyielding, protective, a silent vow etched into the lines of his body. "Right here," he said, his tone steady but laced with a fire that dared Pierce to push further. "Tell me what this is." The air crackled with tension as Pierce's team descended, their movements a blur of purpose. Scanners and decryption rigs slammed onto tables, wires snaking across the room like veins pulsing with life. The space hummed with electricity as they tapped into the chip buried in Rex's neck, screens flaring to life with a cascade of intel mission logs etched in cryptic shorthand, handler IDs flickering like ghosts, live coordinates pulsing with a rhythm that felt alive, dangerous, untamed. Pierce's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching as a flicker of dread broke through his iron facade, his voice dropping to a razor's edge. "It's still hot," he said, each word a cut that bled truth. This wasn't supposed to happen. Keanu's blood turned to ice, a chill seeping into his bones as he stood there, the rain's ceaseless assault a backdrop to the storm raging within. What wasn't? He pressed, his voice low, a growl born of a man teetering on the brink of understanding something vast and unforgiving. Pierce met his gaze, unflinching, his eyes dark pools reflecting a history Keanu could only guess at. "Rex was bound to Officer Hayes," he began, his tone measured but heavy with the weight of memory. "A legend unbreakable, fearless, the kind of man who'd walk through fire and come out standing. Cancer hit him like a sniper's bullet, terminal, ruthless, stripping him away in months. Retirement was chaos, a scramble to tie up loose ends. Someone missed this chip, left it live, and it's been leaking ever since, carrying his legacy, his battles, his ghosts into the present." The words struck Keanu like blows, each one a jagged shard piercing through the armor he'd worn too long, shattering the illusion of control he'd clung to since that rainy afternoon. He turned to Rex, his breath catching at the sight of the dog, noble in his stillness, burdened by a past that refused to fade, a warrior tethered to the fading echo of a hero who'd fought until his last breath. In those amber eyes, Keanu saw not just a companion but a mirror, a reflection of loyalty that transcended time, of wounds that lingered beneath the surface, of a bond forged in sacrifice and left to drift in the void. The room pulsed with the weight of that truth, the operative's frantic work a distant hum against the storm's unyielding cry. Keanu's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms as the realization sank deep. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a thread of fate, a lifeline stretching from Hayes' lost battles to the moment he'd chosen Rex, a call to bear witness to a legacy that demanded to be reclaimed. The rain lashed harder, a mournful hymn to the warrior at his side, and Keanu felt the stirrings of something profound, a duty not just to protect, but to uncover, to honor, to carry forward a story that had been silenced too long. In the cramped exam room of the Harmony Veterinary Center, where the air thrummed with a chaos that seemed to breathe, Keanu Reeves stood as a pillar amid the storm, the hum of Agent Pierce's team weaving around him like a swarm of restless bees, their gear alive with a pulse that mirrored the tension gripping his chest. Rex whimpered, a soft, piercing sound that cut through the clamor and sank into Keanu's soul, a blade of vulnerability that twisted deeper with every note. "What's it leaking?" he demanded, his voice a raw edge as he edged toward the glowing screens, their light casting jagged shadows across his face. Pierce hesitated, a fleeting crack in his steely veneer, before jabbing a finger at the display. Operations. Protocols. Enough to torch active missions if it slips into the wrong hands. The words landed like a sledgehammer, hollowing Keanu's gut with a cold, sinking dread. This wasn't a mere glitch, it was a live wire, crackling with peril, and Rex, with his steady amber gaze, was the fuse, a fragile bridge between a buried past and a volatile present. "Extract it," Pierce commanded, his voice a whip snapping through the haze as he turned to Dr. Ellis, whose nod came swift despite the tremor in his hands, a certainty shadowed by fear. "Quick cut, local anesthesia. I'll replace it with a standard tag," Ellis replied, his tone steady but brittle, a man grasping for control in a moment spiraling beyond him. Yet Keanu's mind drifted, unmoored by the clinical precision unfolding before him, carried instead to Officer Hayes' name, a whisper of tragedy, a man felled by cancer's merciless grip, a goodbye rushed and incomplete. Rex's pawing surged back into his memory, not a flinch of pain, but a call of duty, a silent scream from a past that refused to be silenced, its echo reverberating through the years to find him now. As Ellis's blade met Rex's neck, Keanu dropped to his knees beside the dog, his hand resting firm on the warm flank, a lifeline against the storm. "You've carried enough," he murmured, his voice fracturing under the weight of unshed tears, and Rex's eyes locked with his trusting, unyielding, a depth that pierced through the chaos. In that gaze, Keanu felt the gravity of an unspoken oath, a bond forged not in the calm but in the tempest's heart, sealed as the chip emerged in a fleeting glint of blood and steel. Pierce's team moved swiftly, sealing the data as the live feed flickered out, but for Keanu, the silence that followed wasn't an end, it was a spark, igniting a fire that burned too fiercely to be extinguished. The storm outside softened, its rage ebbing into a mournful hum, yet its resonance lingered in Keanu's bones, a restless ache that refused to fade. He couldn't let this story close with a cold chip abandoned on a table, a relic of a mistake too easily dismissed. He sought out Sergeant Vaughn, his voice crackling over the phone like gravel worn smooth by time, each word laced with a pain that mirrored Keanu's own. "Rex was Hayes' shadow," Vaughn said, his tone heavy with the weight of memory. "The best officer I ever knew, fearless, unbreakable. Cancer struck like a bullet, took him down in months. We pushed Rex out fast, found him a home, but we never checked the chip, never thought it'd still be alive." Keanu gripped the counter, rain tracing mournful paths down the windows behind him, the word alone from Vaughn's next breath, valley edge, in remission, hanging on, alone since Rex left, cutting through him like a blade, echoing the scars he'd carried in silence for years. He hung up, resolve flaring into a blaze that consumed doubt. "We're going, Rex," he said, the words a vow to the dog who'd become more than a companion, a mirror, a mission. The drive was a sacred trek through winding roads, ancient oaks clawing at a sky bruised by fading light, Rex at his side, head resting on Keanu's arm, a silent warrior bound to this pilgrimage. They arrived at Hayes' weathered bungalow, a humble testament to resilience carved from struggle, and Keanu's chest tightened, breath shallow as the door creaked open. Officer Hayes stood there, hollowed by illness, gray hair a crown of survival, his eyes igniting with a shock that shattered the stillness as Rex barreled toward him. "Rex?" Hayes' voice broke, a sob cloaked as a whisper, and the dog collided with him, tail thrashing like a heartbeat reborn. Hayes crumpled to his knees, hands plunging into fur as if grasping a lifeline, his words "you're here," a fragile thread unraveling into tears that carved rivers down his weathered face, a flood of years held back too long. Keanu stood apart, throat raw with an ache he couldn't name, watching a bond snap back into place with a force that shook the earth beneath him. "He never let you go," he whispered, voice barely audible, a confession as much to himself as to Hayes. The officer looked up, eyes shimmering with a gratitude too vast for words, a silent cry of "I thought he was gone forever" woven into the tears that fell unchecked. In that moment, Keanu saw not just a reunion, but a redemption, a testament to loyalty that defied time, a wound healed by the courage to return, a promise kept against the odds, binding them all in a tapestry of loss and love that stretched beyond the storm's reach. Time has a way of stitching itself together, each fragile thread laced with a ferocity that dares us to keep going. In the quiet hum of a life reshaped, Keanu Reeves found himself driving out to Hayes's place more often than not, the road stretching before him like a lifeline pulled taut from the wreckage of what once was. Rex, that noble soul with fur and amber eyes, sprawled beside him in the truck, a silent companion whose presence wove their trio into something unbreakable. Under a sky set ablaze with stars, they'd gather in Keanu's backyard. Hayes leaning against the rough bark of an oak, Rex curled at his feet, and Keanu coaxing raw, trembling notes from a guitar. The air carried the sweet bite of jasmine, laughter rising like a prayer, mingling with the music to form a fragile hymn to survival, a melody that held them together when everything else had threatened to unravel. "Life's a bastard," Keanu once said, his voice cutting through the stillness as the strings fell quiet. "It breaks you, shatters you into pieces, then slips you a second chance when you've stopped searching for it." Hayes nodded, his hand resting on Rex's head, steadying himself against the weight of memory. "He kept me alive when I was ready to let go," he murmured, voice trembling with the ache of truth. "And you brought him back to me." In that moment, Keanu felt it deep in his bones, the searing, breathtaking beauty of redemption, a fragile gift born from ashes. But the story didn't end there. In the soft glow of that night, a fire had ignited in Keanu's chest, fueled by the sting of a system that had failed its own, the chip's betrayal, a wound that refused to heal. From that ember, he birthed legacy of loyalty, a movement that thundered into existence, a crusade for service animals and the handlers who depend on them. Funds poured in, policies bent and shifted, and Rex's tale rippled across the nation like a stone breaking the surface of still water, a beacon for a world desperate for something to believe in. At a gala packed with faces and flickering lights, Keanu stepped onto the stage, his voice a quiet storm. "This isn't just about a dog or a man," he said, each word deliberate, heavy with purpose. "It's about fighting for them, for us, for what's right. Compassion is our weapon. Wield it." The crowd roared, a wave of sound crashing over him, but his eyes sought Hayes and Rex in the shadows, the spark that had set this wildfire ablaze. Months later, walking through a park with Rex padding faithfully at his heel, Keanu paused, the crunch of leaves beneath his boots a reminder of how far they'd come. The journey had carved him anew, stripping away the man he'd been and revealing something stronger beneath, someone who understood that fate doesn't announce itself with fanfare, it whispers, daring you to listen. "What do we make of our scars?" he asked a small crowd gathered nearby, his voice soft yet unyielding, carrying the weight of a man who'd wrestled with that question himself. "We turn them into something that lasts." Hayes, lifted by the bond they'd forged, became a voice for the broken, his story a lighthouse cutting through the fog for those lost in their own darkness. Rex flourished, his amber eyes burning with a purpose that mirrored their own. And Keanu, he discovered a flame he'd thought extinguished, a call to transform every storm into a chance to rise, to reach beyond himself. As the last echoes of a tempest faded into the Los Angeles sky, Keanu stood at the edge of a journey that had redefined him, Rex ever present at his side, a silent sentinel whose peace had been hard-won through reunion. The rain had washed away more than the city's grime, it had laid bare a truth that tethered him to Hayes, a man whose resilience echoed Rex's steadfast loyalty. In the stillness of Hayes's bungalow, where tears had fallen like a cleansing downpour long overdue, Keanu saw their lives weave into a tapestry of sacrifice and loss, threaded with the fierce, fragile beauty of second chances. This wasn't just about a chip's failure or a dog's return, it was about the courage to confront the past, to shoulder another's pain, to find salvation in reaching out when the world turns cold. Life, he realized, doesn't offer neat resolutions. It hands us moments raw, jagged, unrefined, and dares us to give them meaning. That lesson lingers, sharp and tender as the scent of rain on the wind. We are all bound to stories we didn't choose, yet we hold the power to mend their frayed edges with kindness. Keanu's fight for Rex and Hayes wasn't a solitary triumph, it was a clarion call, a reminder that even in our darkest storms, connection can guide us home. So I ask you, when has someone else's story given you strength? What bond has carried you through your own chaos? Share it below. Let's weave our own tapestry of hope. And if this tale stirred something in you, if you hunger for more stories that ignite the soul and fuel the fight, subscribe to Motivation for Success. Together, let's chase the moments that matter, one inspiring step at a time. I'll see you in the next story, ready to rise again.